Do you have any unfinished projects? Perhaps a project going on right now that if someone asked you when is it actually coming out, you couldn't tell them? What if we could give you back all the free time you've allocated into projects that didn't release or release those projects? Now, obviously we can't reverse time, but we can do is we can guard you from ever having unfinished projects again, including any projects that are halfway complete you'd like to finish. The techniques we're going to show you are going to be how you can carry it from where it's at across the finish line by a known deadline. Now, the catch to this is that most people are actually working on the wrong skills to fix this problem. Their assumption is that if they can write, then in order to write a longer book, they just need to write better. Or if they can program, then all they need to do to program a bigger project is to program better. But the problem isn't the writing or the programming or the drawing or the music composition or the interviews or other skill. The problem is a whole set of different skills, lateral skills that fall more under in a team project what a producer would do about scheduling and the related mindsets and challenges around how we navigate a longer term project so the tasks and work add up over time. This is especially important if you only have a little bit of time here and there. It's not your full-time focus, but you only have an evening or two a week, a morning, half an hour here or there, time between classes or otherwise. We're going to show you techniques and strategies so you're ready when you have a bit of time, you can use it productively from having built yourself a plan to know what to do next. And the reason I care so much about this is because part of what happens is people wind up jaded, not because of age or not because of how long they've been doing something, but from the fact that they have put in effort and time and energy, and yet it didn't go anywhere. It turned out wasted. And so suddenly they start holding back. They stop having as many ideas, stop doing stuff with their ideas because they've put in hard work and effort before, and either it fizzled out, didn't go anywhere, or it just didn't get used. And it was work wasted. And we're going to set you up instead so you can move forward with confidence and full energy, full weight behind it, knowing that it's going to release by a given date and then it's going to be behind you. Even though the end result is going to be larger projects, the gift this is really about is about focus. It's about the ability to take on a larger project by doing it as if it's a smaller project. By setting yourself up so you can only look at the current week or the current day or the current to-do list, not having to sweat the big details because you already figured out those details ahead of time. And this is under the assumption that you don't have a full-time producer, so you're not a full-time producer, that instead you're having to be your own producer. And so because of that, these are really, really simple techniques you can do really in one sitting to plan out months of work ahead of you. We're going to show you how we can do it here on a variety of different kind of projects with a set of different techniques and tools you can use for whatever kind of thing you're trying to develop. And these skills matter more than ever because there are so many big businesses that their area of expertise is selling your attention to advertisers and other people who want your eyeballs. We're going to set you up so instead of when you have a moment feeling like, well, the next natural thing to do is to scroll a feed, you're going to already know where you can spend that energy because you've built a plan, and the next easiest thing to do is going to be move that plan forward. But even though scheduling is going to be at the heart of what we're teaching in this course, we're also going to cover a variety of adjacent techniques, including how to make big decisions that involve a lot of factors and potentially multiple people's input. We're going to talk about how to take feedback and set up formalized feedback so you can improve what you're doing to better deliver the results you're going for in ways that don't necessarily involve a bunch of extra work or harder work, but can be more resourceful at how you're using your energy in the limited time that you have. And then finally, it's going to be not just about how to use those tools, but about different ways of thinking. The mindset shifts that it takes are going to be the last parts of this course dedicated to business development, to administrative thinking, to the necessary difficulties of working with messy uncertainties and times and schedules that slide and people and the realities of teams and all that kind of stuff. We're going to tackle those so you know enough that you don't have to lean on an outside producer or be at a disadvantage if you can't find one. Now, who might be teaching this? I'm Chris DeLeon, and I've been training people in this, literally hundreds of people for hundreds of projects for more than the past decade. This is something that mostly my focus is in game development, so we're going to build up to a team long-term software project that we build a video game. But along the way, these are the same techniques I've also used in solo projects, in commercial projects, for launching my podcast, for launching my YouTube videos, for launching my video courses, which have been used by hundreds of thousands of people. It's a technique that's highly universal. And whether you're solo, with a team, commercial, non-commercial, short-term, long-term, these same techniques will apply. Part of what's going to make these techniques powerful for you is how much they generalize in a way you can even use them on things you don't know how to do yet. Because we're able to build learning into the process, or exploration and decision-making into the process. So what we're giving here is not some sort of template to copy or fill out the answers for. It's going to be a process you can apply to new domains that at the time of this video creation, those domains don't even exist yet. This will still apply. But most important to me, your ability by the end of this course to pick a date and time on the calendar and say, by this date, I'm going to have learned this skill. I'm going to have released this project. I'm going to have started this new thing in my life and be set up for it in a way that you're not overwhelming yourself. You're not pushing yourself, pressuring yourself. You're spreading it out. You're pacing it. You're able to go about it in a way that you're now in control. You're now in the driver's seat and able to make decisions. You don't have to worry about, will I be able to do it? You're able to think about, what do I want to do? And so as part of this setup for the course, I want you to think about, what is the skill you want to learn, the project you want to do, the thing you want to release by a particular date. Think about that project, think about the date, and then throughout this course, you're going to learn a variety of techniques to set you up so by the end of it, you'll be ready to build that plan. But before we dig into the scheduling elements, first at a high level, just to think about what a producer is doing, let's first talk about some of these props in my background. Now, one of the things that can make producer ideas challenging is they can be a little bit abstract if we're not careful. So we're going to base a lot of what we're covering in concrete, practical, hands-on techniques, but also I find props are a great way to ground some of our concepts as well. And so the things in the background here, reminders, some high-level things we're going to see threaded throughout this course, back in little ways to kind of, again, keep us situated. So first off, the arcade cabinet is a reminder to keep it fun, right? And this is something where if we're not careful, producer stuff, business development things that can get a little adminish. It can feel a little bit spreadsheety, and we're going to use spreadsheets for sure, but it's a choice to keep it fun, to keep it light, and it's not just something to make the work less miserable. It genuinely will come across better to your teammates. It'll help you maintain your morale if you keep a level of enthusiasm about it and choose to have fun with it. Next thing we're going to see here is a Power Glove, a classic Nintendo controller that famously, not a great controller, but very memorable. And this is something too where between each one of the projects that we do, we don't want to let it become ever routine or too much of a slog or too much paint by the numbers. Each time we're leading projects, we're looking for opportunities for how can we make this special to stand out in our portfolios, to stand out in our experiences on the development side and our experiences from the creativity side. It's, again, a choice we can make, and we'll see how that fits into our planning. So, again, it's not just some sort of rigid calculations. It's really thinking about what are the missing elements? How do we find those? How do we perhaps seek feedback to inform those parts of our processes? Next up, we have this Terminator skull from a pinball machine. I used to do a lot of pinball maintenance in my grad school days, and the Terminator course famously, persistently, tirelessly chases you down. He's coming for you and he's never going to divert. And this is one of those things where as the producer, you've got to be the one on your team, or if you're solo, then when you're in your producer hat, keeping an eye on the time. The time is finite. We only have so much of it. And here's something where you might even think, okay, well, what if I'm doing this as a freeware hobby, just practicing, just learning something? Well, I don't really have a burn rate. I'm not running out of funding. I'm not, making my investors unhappy. You still have finite burn rate. But what's limited is your attention, it's your enthusiasm. If you don't get that plane off the runway before you run out of it, the project fizzles out. And so we're always going to keep in mind of how much time do we have left? How much time do we say this project was worth to us? Was it worth a 3-month thing, a 6-month thing, a 2-year thing? By what date did I say it was going to come out? And we got to keep an eye on how much time do we have left and what is that time going to impact? Next one behind me is one of my textbooks that I wrote. Hands-on Intro to Game Programming. It's the basis of my video courses used by hundreds of thousands of people, but it's a book about the fundamentals of doing game programming by making some classic games. And it's one of those things where even if you're a producer, mostly, even if you're mainly interfacing to others who are doing the actual work of producing sound effects or writing code perhaps, or writing pages, making interviews, whatever the thing is you might be helping produce, it's valuable to ground yourself in at least the fundamentals and basics of what are the skills of the people that you are, in some sense, managing. Even if you're not formally their manager, it'll help you be taken seriously if you can speak their language. If you're coordinating artists and you've done some art, if you're coordinating musicians and you've tried making some music. Now, obviously, any one of these skills are things people can spend their entire career, their entire lifespan of work focusing on getting deeper and deeper. And I'm not saying you have to be great at it. I'm not saying you have to be as good at them at it. What I am saying is it'll help them take you seriously, and more importantly, it'll help you have a better eye out for their needs and issues. So, as say a larger team might get, one of the things that starts to happen is people who are deeply specialized, I don't want to say quite take for granted what other people do, but it can be a big black box to them, where they don't really have a sense for what's going on this whole other side of the floor. And it's a case where if you have done even some basics of modeling, of texturing, of programming, of whatever other things on your team are happening, you've got a better lens for, actually, hold on, I think there's some devil in the details. This might be more complicated than we're making it out to be. I'm going to go check with those team members, and let's actually have them inform this process. You know, it might seem just the same to us, option A or option B. Maybe it makes a difference over there. I can picture some reasons why, again, there might be some devil in the details. Let's go double check with them. And now onto our other side. First thing I've got down here is a classic edition of the book Walden by Henry David Thoreau. And of course, famously, the person went off into the woods, mostly living alone. He visited the town or had some friends, but mostly living alone to think, to clear his mind, to get his thoughts collected. And this is something where part of what you have to do as a producer is make sure you're setting aside time, defending time in your schedule, not just for meetings, not just for working with others, not just for giving presentations or any of that kind of stuff, but really to organize yourself, to get your thoughts together, to think clearly, to get away from the hecticness. Part of what you are doing in even a solo project when you're wearing the producer hat is separating yourself from this current bug you're frustrated on, this current page you're trying to write, this thing that right now you're obsessing over. You need the distance from that to have the higher level perspective of what's going on. And of course, this Walden book came back and wrote a book about it. He wasn't truly a hermit. He didn't go off in the woods and die. He took his thoughts and brought them back to everybody else and clearly communicated those. And again, it's one of these things. It's not like you're necessarily coming in with a vision saying, here's how we're going to do it, but it is to say, I've spotted some opportunities. I've spotted some risks. I've spotted some people that if we get them right in the room together, it can create new benefits for our entire team. That's going to come from giving yourself that space and protecting that space as a part of the work. It's not just something you do when you're turned on in front of a crowd of people. It's not just something you do looking at the spreadsheet. It's something you need to give yourself some time and perhaps distance from the day-to-day, from the minimal stuff that's going on, just to keep things moving, to figure out, are we moving in the right direction? Are we actually making progress in the way we think we are? That's why I got Walden back here. Now, my YouTube award, proud to say, got over 100,000 subscribers, or I think 10 million views by this point. But it's a reminder that when we're doing these things, the specialists often aren't thinking about visibility. They often aren't worrying about how are people going to find our thing. They're taking for granted it's either going to happen or someone else is looking out for it. Now, as the producer, I'm not saying you necessarily are inheriting a whole bunch of marketing tasks necessarily. I am saying that whether or not they're getting done might be more on your shoulders than somebody else. One of the threads we're going to see throughout is that often, if it's not something a specialist is paying attention to, it's probably going to come back to you as the producer to make sure that it's getting done. Whether that's taxes, whether that's marketing, whatever it is. And visibility is an important one. Because if you wait, it's going to be too late. If you wait until the project is done, if you wait until the project's ready to ship and it's released and finished, it's probably going to be dead in the water. No one's anticipating it. No one's looking forward to it. No one thought it was coming. There's a reason why Hollywood and all these other industries that are in the field of getting $1 bazillion in sales spend years of ramp-up time about what's coming around the corner. Now, there's anxiety people have around trying to put visibility on something that's not ready to show yet. They're worried about what if it doesn't come to fruition. That's part of why the techniques we're going to cover in this course are going to show you how to make sure you're going to hit your deadline. They're going to make you make sure you can follow through in your project. So you have the confidence that you can promise, I'm doing this and it's going to be out by holiday of this year. And you can stick to that plan. We're going to show you how to do it. Next we have a book here is a Bagatelle board. It's an old pinball back from when they used to, literally why they called it pinball, right? Because it has pins on the table. You know what? Let's take a moment to play it. Balls are down here. Got a little thing I can slide here to keep the score. And the trick is if you give it too much, ooh, nailed the 40. If you give it too much force, I'm going to overshoot everything. Too little is going to drop down. Ah! I was hoping I would make this look easy, but I'm not. Woo! It never meant to be easy, though. Nailing it twice in a row. That should be worth something. But the reason why I have that there is because it's one of these things that it's a 100-year-old table, and the principles of it are still sound. The things we're going to look at throughout this course are really practices and fundamentals that have been applicable for decades and will be applicable for decades to go. It's not some special piece of software. We're going to use Trello for a lot of this. This isn't some sort of Trello trick. The same thing can work on any other kind of Kanban supported technology. The same thing has always worked on a whiteboard with index cards and magnets or corkboard with pins. You can use these techniques. They're much more analog and old-fashioned than it looks. To not get fixated on if this single platform changes from underneath, oh, then what? Because what you're going to learn is a technique and a process and a practice you can take and apply to any set of tools. And we're going to see throughout a variety of techniques we can use where, yeah, sure, we're going to do it in Google Sheets, or it might as well be Excel. It might as well be any kind of thing where we can take a grade and do some numbers, because it's the thought process first and foremost, and that is timeless. It's not something that's going to change. Every given week, there's going to be some sort of ad flying in front of your face for use this new fancy software service, use this new app. That's not what's really doing the work. It's the process we're applying, within which we just need some tools that let us put down some ideas and rearrange them. And then it's the techniques we bring to that that's going to make a difference. Now, speaking of tools in Trello, I do want to show real quick, at least a high level, the main kind of tools we're going to look at. So this next section, we're going to try to keep it short, but I want to show you some of the main stuff we're going to focus on and a couple of the options or alternatives that are out there. I'm going to be using Trello.com, Trello.com, but that is just one of many different options out there. So if you already use Notion boards actually support the same kind of thing. You're just looking for we have a board view, and you can then drag cards between columns. You can rearrange columns. We're going to show you practices that use these. Now, the same technique here. Workflow is kind of a newer one, Workflowy. I really like it. It's collapsing outlines. So you can group and rearrange elements and hide and conceal details. Anyway, it's got the option on the more recent versions of the updates. You can change the options to show a chunk as a board rather than as bullets. And so again, once you have it set up, then you can drag these dots to move a card between pieces. We can rearrange columns, and that's the kind of functionality we're looking for in what we're setting up here. Evernote, which I know is a popular platform for people to use to keep track of their notes and scraps and thoughts and plans, it doesn't natively support this, but there's this other thing called Kanban Note. You'll see is identical to the stuff we're going to be looking at, that kind of structure. Now, the reason why it's called Kanban Note is that this pattern in general, the tool we're using is things that are meant for Kanban. We're not really doing Kanban with it. There's a normal practice that has kind of to do, doing, done, or kind of swim lanes like that. And it's going to be used in a similar fashion so we can use the same system. But honestly, what we're doing here could work if you had a whiteboard that was magnetic and some index cards. If you had a corkboard with some pins, these are exactly the same processes you could do that way. We're just using the fact that it's a kind of a handy system. We have a mobile app. We can update our notes in. We can collaborate remotely with people. So that's kind of nice. But really, it's just a way to shuffle cards around in columns. But we're going to use it in a totally different way than Kanban. It's part of why I offer these alternatives is I don't know if Trello's going to change their plan, but right now you can get like 10 boards per workspace, totally free. The same general practice can be done in any of these other Kanban board looking sites. So we're going to create a new board, but let's start up to the next video to really dig in on how we're building that board out. Our later examples are going to build up to team projects that take multiple months. We're going to tackle things you've never done before, starting a YouTube channel, starting a podcast, doing some pretty big things. But I want to start with something pretty foundational and fundamental that I'm certain you've done before. We're going to look at how to read a book. Now, again, I know you've read a book, and you might even think this is overkill, but this has helped me out a lot, right? So many years ago, I was going through a PhD program before I decided to teach independently. I had a lot of readings assigned every single week to have to discuss. This is how I got through it. When I was making a game based on Walden many years ago, I needed to read all of Walden. This is how I got through it. Now, again, there might be a case where like you love reading, you don't have a problem reading, but there's probably some book you've picked up because you meant to have read it, or perhaps not even a book, right? Maybe there's a video course you bought because you knew that on the other side of watching those videos, of following along the activities, was a better life for you. If you could just get yourself through it. But then, for weird little reasons, right, it's just not happening. I carried this book around. This was the book I needed to read next. I could tell. Winning the Right Game by Ron Adner. I thought it was a handy book. I had been carrying it around, stuck on page 33. Now, what sort of mental hang-up was there that I was worried it was going to change my strategy, change my approach? Something about it, right? It wasn't the reading level. It was just I wasn't reading it. I wanted to get through it. So what I did was I built a simple plan to finish reading it in a week. And again, the same exact technique will apply for you've got a video course you've been sitting halfway through. Right? You've got something else. Or heck, you've maybe just got a whole stack of things to do, right? I've done this when I've needed to edit my podcast videos, when I did it when I needed to edit my books, my audio courses, and so on, was recognizing, okay, there's so many hours or so many minutes to go through of editing. We're just going to divide it out. It's going to be simple, but it's going to help introduce us to the fundamentals of the same techniques we're going to carry up a level to take on things we've never done before. Like I say, starting a podcast, starting a YouTube video, starting a big team project for a game. Even if you never do those specific things, it's going to be our way to kind of cover those techniques in a grounded way to keep it realistic. So let's start off by creating a new board. Here I'm logged into Trello. I'm going to create a first board. Read that book, finally. I'm going to default here to a flat blue color. And again, I'm just on the free plan of Trello, which is really all you need for this. Now, I will say, even though we got a flat blue color background, I like to set the background. For me, it helps keep me situated. So I defaulted to blue because I wanted to pick one consciously. And without a paid plan, you can upload a custom photo, but we can pick one. And so, okay, what is this? This is a book I want to read because it's got some business benefit to me. I wasn't having a fun time. It wasn't of interest to just kind of explore the fiction or fantasy. But so I would pick an image that to me kind of speaks, I don't know, the energy level, the tone. I like this sort of element here, this calm of the coffee. Ooh, MailChimp. Never mind, I don't love MailChimp. Had some bad MailChimp experiences. Let's just find kind of a nice background here. Ooh, some people high-fiving. Love to see it. Yeah, there we go. High-fiving people. Great. So we're going to create a list here of some things that we're trying to do, and we're going to make it really, again, the most basic imaginable. We're first just going to delineate these days ahead of us. So today happens to be a Wednesday that I'm starting this plan, and I'm going to say for or by or due Wednesday. And as we're going to see, this is going to get more important. We have a bigger, longer schedule about a weekly check-in or a monthly check-in or quarterly or whatever we want the time interval to be. But this makes clear this isn't the day that these things start. This is the day we're trying to have those things done by the end of. So I'm going to say, in this case, let's go with due. Due Wednesday, due Thursday, due Friday, due Saturday, and going for a week, so we're going to take all the way around. Due Monday, Saturday, due. Hey, you know what? Let's actually specifically make a point. We're going to skip Sunday. We're going to put it in the calendar anyway to help us show that we're skipping it. Due Monday, due Tuesday, due Wednesday again. We'll have it wrap around. So we have 7 full days here. And even the periods that we don't mean to do something, we're putting in there to help delineate the time and be clear about this time is accounted for. So this is going to be family and break day from reading. And it's not that it's painful. The holidays, we're going to spread it out because what would happen, right, when I would open this book up, I was on page 33, needed to get paid 197. I would open it up and just kind of chip away a little bit, just a fraction of a page, and then get kind of distracted and do something else. We're going to set it into a pace so each day the amount's really manageable. So this is simple math. We can use a calculator. I'm going to type into Google. I want to get to page 197. I'm on page 33. I want to split it up over 7 days, so 23, 24 pages a day. So for each one of these, I'm going to say, reach page 57, right? That's 33 plus 24. Then reach page 81, reach page 105. And of course, you could do this multiplication however you want to do it. Reach page 129. And what I want to point out here too is that I'm putting these actual, we made a point to skip that one. Reach page 153. Reach page 171 or 177. And then we're going to end on 197, which is, of course, not a full interval because we kind of had a rounding error in there. I also want to show, by the way, I'm scrolling left and right by using the mouse wheel and the shift key. That's going to save you because especially if you start building longer schedules, you're going to have a lot of columns. It's handy to be able to do that. But I want to point out here, I'm going to put these page counts on the day. I'm not just saying another 20. I'm being clear about what is the goal on that date. And the reason this is important is because it's going to avoid us slipping off track. It avoids us wondering how much we're falling behind. If we actually get in 10 or 15 pages here or there, we can actually look at it. The other thing about this is you might see this and say, okay, well, this is going to be more of a pain to update. For what if I fall a little off track? Got to go in and change some numbers around and move cards around. That's kind of the point. We actually want to make it a little bit inconvenient to slip, right? If we didn't have a plan at all, which is where I was when I wasn't making progress on it, then it's so much easier to just kind of let the time pass us by. And that's where our Terminator skull comes in. The producer lens is that we're paying attention to time. We're not going to let it sneak past. We're making it concrete. We're not letting it be abstract. We're grounding it. If I look at this and it's Saturday, I can't deny to myself how much time has passed. So my goal here being to read to page 57. Maybe I even overshoot it a little bit. But when Wednesday is done and behind me, I will archive that entire column. It goes away. We're burning the bridge behind us. And again, I know this is super simple and seems like overkill for reading a book or getting through a course, but it's helpful. It's helped me kind of dig my way out of when I've just got a whole lot to do and I need to stay on track. It's made these things more manageable. And again, more importantly, a week later, I'm done with it. But with the same technique we're going to burn our way because the past is no longer there. There's no longer a time, right? When it comes down to Friday, okay, I'm caught up a little bit. Archive the day behind me. It lets us keep up with what is present in the time remaining. Doesn't matter how much time has passed. It really doesn't. Some people want to have a whole bunch of empty columns or they want to think in terms of, am I 30% of the process? It's irrelevant. What's relevant is where am I at now and where am I trying to get by when? The other thing we're going to see is we have these little plans coming together is that we only want to focus on the near term. The whole reason why we build out the plan and do the math or do the division is so that we don't have to think about this stuff, so we don't feel overwhelmed, so we don't look at the book and think, oh man, I still got another 150 pages to go or whatever. And again, some parts is kind of dry and some are business cases and it's interesting, but also there's other stuff I'd rather do. It makes it manageable. It's pacing it. So much what we do when we start taking this up a level from just reading a book in a week to launching a podcast, launching a YouTube, building a whole video game with a team. It's something where if we try to take it all in at once, it's too much. It's overwhelming. And the whole idea of these schedules, right, is to not overwhelm us by letting us look at just the next step. That we've figured out in advance that if we just take a simple, another 23 pages, 24 pages here and there, one day at a time, we're going to keep on pace. And it lets me know when I've read enough for the day to clear the task and archive the column. Now, a couple of notes here. Some people, they like to have a done column. And so in that case, of course, instead of archiving the whole list, we'd drag it into the done, and then we'd still burn that day as it goes behind us. In this case, it's simple enough for this plan, right? I mean, you don't even really need a whole schedule for this. We're just kind of showing the breakdown. You could do this as a checklist. You could do this on a piece of paper or a whiteboard. It's the thought process, the dividing it out over time, spreading it out, and then just keeping up with how much time is left. Okay, we've got 4 days left. It's Sunday. We're not thinking about the time behind us. And again, Sunday here, notice, even though it was in the plan, we made conscious we're not supposed to try to read that day. This is a part of the planning too. This is something where if it's time of year where you've got holidays, you've got family travel, you've got birthday coming up, maybe a major final going on in college, something going on where, you know what, during that time, you can't focus on this stuff. You've got to have your full energy committed to something else. Build it directly into your plan. And what's important about this is that it means that you can schedule things like longer term plans without nothing but uninterrupted time. Increasingly, what you come to realize, right, is if you need a huge block of uninterrupted time, things are just never going to happen because there's always something else going on in the calendar, in your life. And so our fix for that is to account for it in the plans and say, no, this week is committed to that. And then, again, looking only at the present tense, only looking at the narrow, put on those blinders, look straight at just the next step. All I'm focusing on is that today is not the day to think about that book at all. Won't even pick it up. Go back to Monday, picking up where I left off. I can see where I'm at. And if I need to make those numbers, okay, maybe at this point I'm either behind or ahead. I can still adjust these numbers. This is part of why, even though we don't necessarily need a high-tech solution or a certain app, it is nice to have something that's easily updated. Something, an advantage to using software to do this rather than writing on a paper with a pen, is that often our plans are going to be kind of soft. They're going to evolve a bit as we go. We're going to see that more in the more advanced examples we're doing, but it's something where each section of it, if we need to make changes, we can, and to not feel bad about that, to fully expect that we might have overplanned or been ambitious in our initial scoping and pace. That's normal. That's how most things come together, is by course correcting from those slightly wrong assumptions. Now, another version of this you might see is that, okay, let's see again, we were falling behind, right? We just weren't getting 24 pages done a day. Now, a few different ways to look at that strategy. So think about it. Either we can change our release goal and say, release here in the case of as if we were finishing a product. We can change when we're going to have the book being done, read by giving ourselves some extra time. Or we can weigh that trade-off and say, or here's the thing, right? Maybe the case is I'm reading a book for school to discuss in a group or something. Well, I can't really move that deadline. Instead, what I'm going to do is compress the fidelity at which I'm doing this to be able to still hit that goal. And so here's where this is, again, a common part of I have several books I was supposed to read per week on top of other coursework and projects and teaching obligations or whatever in university. This day, I told myself I would be responsible for learning what I could from those 23 pages. And I say learning what I could because I didn't, let's be clear, necessarily read each word in order perfectly. Occasionally what I would do is kind of start at the end, look in the middle, look at the first part, skim the paragraphs, try to figure out what are the themes, what are the points, are there some contradictions, is there something in this point I can speak to, and it can feel glossing over, and again, it's not quite as ideal as maybe if you can get every single word in, but here's the other thing, every single word in perfect detail, you don't retain 100% of it anyway, right? It's not how brains work. So as long as you're still able to get something out of it, there's still an advantage here to the fact that we are spreading out. On one day, I'm going to get what I can from this chunk. The next day, what I can from that chunk. The next day, what I can from that chunk. And this is actually going to be better for your attention than if you sat down in one evening and just read it start to finish. There's this interesting memory effect of we tend to recall best the things at the start and end of a session, of a sitting. And so by spreading out how many start and ends you have, by giving yourself time between each day to think back on it, to let it bake in the back burner a little bit, it might actually be better. But the same thing is going to be true for a lot of our projects, where by pacing it out over time with a little bit of half an hour here, an evening here and there, it's going to help it situate in our thoughts where we have more chance to second guess it with some distance, or maybe see some outside inspiration that clicks in from a book we're reading, a show we're watching, something else we're doing, a conversation we have with somebody, to realize that there's not too late now to incorporate that back into our plans. We pick up the next piece the next time we have a chance to sit down with it. That comes from pacing ourselves, though, not from letting it build up on us and slam us at the end. So again, sometimes you can change it, you can adjust the deadline, but more often than not, what we're really going to try to do is compress the fidelity. And again, this I know it can seem so simple for the case of just reading a book. We're going to see the exact same thing in these more advanced cases, though. But the advantage of having these dates with the specific page counts is, again, maybe we actually fell behind a little bit. So we now have more pages to catch up on. The very fact that we can kind of compress where we're making those trade-offs into a smaller span of the book, or our editing, or whatever the kind of work that we're trying to spread out and pace. Maybe it's because we need to author 300 item descriptions for a game. I don't know. It's something we have a whole bunch to do over time. we can spread out and pace those trade-offs and compromises so we don't just wind up entirely missing the last section or not giving due attention to other parts in proportion. It lets us be deliberate about where our limited, finite energy, time, and attention can go and making the best of that. Now, another version of this that you can also use as a technique that we're going to see again, especially in those bigger, more advanced examples, is so we had that Sunday in here, right? Which, by the way, in Trello, I can double click under a column to insert and put one back here for due Sunday to inject a new column. And I'll say, not a reading day. So one of the things you can also build into your schedules is, let's say that's not what's in the plan. Maybe this could be a catch-up day. You can build wiggle room in. And this is one of the things, if you don't do it intentionally, it might happen accidentally anyway. But it's good, especially if you have a much longer span. I mean, this was 1 week. This is a book. What's the big deal? If we have something that's spreading out for months, there's a lot of other uncertainties in outside life about what's going to happen, what's going to come up, what's going to derail us from being on the pace we meant to be on. And it'd be good to build in some catch-up periods in there. I think of this thing, growing up, we'd be browsing houses between places we lived. And my mom would like to point out that there were houses with stairs that went straight down, and if you fell all the way down. There were stairs that would bend 90 degrees every now and then. Those are nice because if you fell, you're only falling a fraction of all the way. Same kind of be in these schedules. You can build in those points. So if you start to slide and drag some things forward or fall behind, you can have built-in catch-up periods so it doesn't just keep on snow plowing and accumulating without any end to that buildup. That's a choice we make when we're building our schedules. Again, we're going to see it even more dramatized on these bigger projects, but it's so much easier to see in this microcosm, the simple example of reading a book with it. And the last 2 points I want to make about this, the first one being that notice how I started on page 33, right? We didn't start this project by building a plan. We tried to do it without it. We figured out we weren't getting anywhere. We then built some rails and we moved it over onto those rails. This is exactly how and why you're going to be able to take projects that had just never left the runway. You had started, maybe you prototyped it, you did it in a software jam of some kind. It just didn't get where you wanted to go. You don't have to start over. It's not too late. The fact you didn't have a plan when you started it, you can take it from where it's at, and from that point, plan. Notice again, I started from page 33 and carried it forward from there. You can look at your project. Where is it at now? Where do I want to get it to? It's not too late to build a plan after the thing is already started. And then the second thing I want to end on here is that ideally, out of the different tools available to us, where possible, I really want to not move that deadline. Having a deadline is so important, and it can seem silly on, again, a 1 week reading, but the thing of it is, if you can't plan with 7 days, how do you expect to plan with 7 months? It is a problem at every scale. Companies that have $500 million wish they had $700 million. Companies that have 5 years wish they had 7 years. Every single scale, you either figure out to learn how to do what you can with the resources and time you got, or you don't. And the exact same problems and mentalities that will cause an overrun in finishing this book within a week only get magnified and boosted to all different scales on a project that takes months. So part of what I try to do with these sort of things is to really take it as an opportunity to practice nailing my target, to slow down as I'm approaching. An example I think about for this is that if you send a spaceship from Earth to Mars, it's got to spend half that time speeding up towards Mars and half the time slowing down. If it doesn't, it's going to slam into the planet too hard. And so the exact same approach here happens of, as we're nearing the end, we want to make sure we're going to come down to a steady landing, nail that release. And again, this is the easiest way to practice it on a short term with a small thing that you've done before. It's only get more and more complicated from here as we move into bigger projects that we've maybe never done before or involve a lot of learning as we go. Speaking of which, let's get out of the kiddie pool here on using it to plan to read a book, and we're going to use it for how to launch a YouTube channel as just an example of a bigger project that we probably anticipate is going to have some uncertainty outside of us, involving communications with others about things we haven't yet learned how to do, and we're going to build that right into our schedule. So bear with me for this next section here. We're going to cover again how to launch a YouTube channel.